You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.
1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
I get pumped, man. I hear that music. I'm telling you, Charles, every week I am pumped for Detroit, City of Champions, the story of 1935. Hanging out with you and Tom, and Matt Fox pushing our buttons.
Matt Fox is here this week. That's awesome.
Yay! Made it.
We
What snow?
missed them last couple
What
weeks.
snow? I don't
Seriously,
care.
I'm not a sports person by any shape of the imagination, but these stories and that are coming together with you being, just the journeyman journalist that just pulled these things together. Tom, you got so much experience and so much firsthand knowledge of so many of these great people. And then Matt and I just sit here in awe of the fun that we get to have and tell these stories from your trilogy of books that we're going to make this darn thing it is a screenplay.
We got the screenplay. The next step is actually turn it into the first sports epic movie ever made.
I want to see it. And there's a lot of things that'll be it could come to life. I mean, there's so many outlets for that side of things. So we'll share the stories, and then people find out about it. We're in the middle of sharing the Red Wings story, though, right?
Yeah,
We're
this is a cool
middle, beginning. There's so much to tell. I'd say we're still at the beginning of it all.
It really is, yeah. I mean, it's there's a lot. But I just love to be able to unpack this story.
Yeah,
like one episode at a time, because there is a ton to unpack, and it's just to glance over some of this stuff is just to really do an injustice to the details themselves, like to the stories and the people that did it.
So where did we leave off? What did we touch on last time?
Well, last time we talked about we talked about how James Norris came to town, and in the Cougars. They'd gone from the Cougars to the Falcons, and then James Norris came in
because they needed money. They were almost bankrupt. They were bankrupt,
yep.
And
And then James Norris gave them. Now he brings in money into this.
I love it when
needed situation.
I love when millionaires fight each other.
Yeah, and that was the other thing is we started to sort of unpack the story, the rivalry between Norris and Frederick McLaughlin, who was the owner of the Blackhawks.
What could go wrong when millionaires start to fight?
That's the greatest type of fight that there is, right? Yeah, everybody loves that kind of fight.
Yeah.
More money you get. So,
I'll say you're going to see him Sunday at the Super Bowl. The millionaires hitting the millionaires.
Oh my
except
God.
for now they're on
Right?
the field.
Yeah. Now the millionaires are on the
they're
field.
actually on the field.
The billionaires are fighting in the stands.
Yeah. So that's where we were talking about James Norris and the incredible impact he had on hockey in Detroit.
Right.
Not only did he bring the name Red Wings, based on the Montreal Winged Wheelers.
Mm-hmm.
He brought that with him to Detroit and became the Red Wings. So he brings in that, and he also brings the cash that they need to actually compete like a legitimate NHL hockey club amongst the heavyweights that are out there. That's where
what's on tap for today? What are we going to look at today?
Well, what we touched on was how in Norris's first season, the first season as the Red Wings, the team goes to the Stanley Cup. They're saying Stanley Cup Finals. Yeah.
Okay.
Just make sure it's accurate. So we don't have to do an apology later.
Yeah.
On. We have to do the thing.
Dear fans that actually know their crap, we would like to severely apologize.
Yeah. So actually, the first year of the Red Wings, they win their first playoff series in 32-33.
Right.
And then 33-34 the following year, Norris opens up his bankroll and gets a guy named Ralph Cooney-Weiland from Ottawa, who's like one of the best scorers in the NHL and had a massive rivalry with Herbie Lewis in their minor league days. And Cooney-Weiland, and also we talked about Wilf Cute, how he was on loan from Montreal Canadiens, and he became the best goalie in the league that year.
Yeah.
And they propelled them to the Stanley Cup, and that was the year 33-34. And then they lost to the Blackhawks in their first Stanley Cup appearance. 1-0 in double overtime. They lost to the Blackhawks, which to to the, of any team they could have lost to. It could have, Frederick McLaughlin and the Blackhawks. That's who they got beat by, by Norris's first Stanley Cup appearance for his team. They get beat. And so anyways, so that was 33-34. And we started, and then so we really left off in 34-35, which is really the season prior to the main focus of the show. So 34-35 is like the primer. So like kind of like with the Tigers.
Yeah.
The Tigers in 1934 came out of nowhere and it galvanized the entire Detroit sports world. Like the entire Detroit fandom is going crazy for the Tigers. It was a renaissance for the Tigers in 34. They go all the way to the World Series and lose in 7 games. And then the Lions come to Detroit in 1934. They win 10 straight games before folding at the end of the year.
How do you not take it all when you win 10 straight games?
Exactly. Well, they ran into the Bears.
Games, yeah.
They ran into the Bears.
The Bears.
Exactly. So the Bears, and they also they ran into the Bears. They also ran into the Packers, but they lost twice to the Bears and got knocked out. So anyway, that's sort of, we already talked about how the birth of that rivalry became beginning in that year. And then so at this time, Joe Louis is coming up out of nowhere. He still wasn't a household name, but his name was becoming known in fight circles, as we'll see when we get to that section of our story. But so anyways, there's a lot of things going on in Detroit in 1934, and everything except for the Red Wings. Because the Red Wings are awful in 1933 or in 1934, 35. So while everybody else is doing really great, the Red Wings are just they're awful. They're not. I mean, they're not like the worst team ever ever played, but they only won. They had 19 wins, 22 losses, 7 ties. So they were just unspectacular. There was nothing.
Right.
They were irrelevant in a city that were full of growing winners. You see?
So, and then. Just not to get off track or ahead of ourselves, because I'm sure we'll do an episode or two on them, but the Olympians, right?
Olympics, yeah.
The Olympics. How are they doing as a minor league, or is it that?
Well, that's what we left off with. Is the one bit of good news for this franchise is they won the 1934-35 IHL championship.
Okay.
So whereas the Red Wings are playing they're not the worst team in the league that year, but they're back page news compared to the Tigers and even the Lions. The Lions are trying to compete for coverage with the Tigers, but the Red Wings were certainly back news. And hockey still had not truly captured the public's imagination.
We had more Canadians coming over from Windsor to watch hockey than we had,
than
American
actual
hockey
Detroit fans watching hockey. Yeah, there's more fans come from Windsor to cheer on these Canadian teams than there was actual Detroiters showing up to these games. Yeah. And so, and that's, you also got the Olympics playing at Olympia Stadium, which you've already talked about on previous shows. Yeah. How that was unique in sports was that you'd have a minor league team playing in the same stadium as the majors. Yeah. And I think that was actually kind of beneficial for the gate because, you might have, because they played the different teams besides the Red Wings would play like the Maple Leafs, but then, the Olympics would play like the Cleveland Bulldogs. Yeah. They would play like these different cities, and so there might be people that might be interested in seeing that matchup. So the minor league team play there. So the Olympics play there. In the Olympics, while the Red Wings are doing terrible, the Olympics are winning the IHL championship in this year. Okay, and so and again we talked about last week how Donnie Hughes, who was with Jack Adams in Ottawa, he was a trainer with Ottawa while Jack Adams was winning the Stanley Cup. And then Donnie Hughes was the guy who was the coach of the Olympics. He's actually in the team photo that we showed a few episodes ago. Donnie Hughes is in that Ottawa Stanley Cup champion photo, the team photo. But anyways, so Donnie Hughes is running the team and for the Olympics, and the Olympics win their championship. So so Jack Adams now is in the situation where Jack Adams and James Norris are all in the situation where they're not blind to the fact that they are basically irrelevant in a city full of winners. Yeah. Okay. And really, they in a way they kind of dodged a bullet because if the Tigers had won a World Series and the Lions had won a championship and all this stuff has happened,
they were dismal.
Yeah, and they would have really been irrelevant. Right. They would have been like, well, we only care for winners here. You guys weren't part of it. And so now all of a sudden, the Tigers had come just close. And then the Lions had come just so close. They both were there. And so now 34, I've said it from the very first episode that 1934 was the primer year. It was the year, it's essential. Whenever I talk about 35, you always got to talk about 34 and all the stuff, because 34, all the stuff that happened in 34 set up 35. Like I say, the Tigers get to the World Series. The Lions come into that was their first year, and then they win, they win 10 games and they do all this stuff. And Joe Louis had, was working his way through the ranks all the way through 34 to set up his big year in 35. And so in this case, the Red Wings are, the primer for them is that they're awful. and they know they're awful, and they know that they're like next year the Tigers the 1935 Tigers were probably the most anticipated baseball season, at least in Detroit history. I mean, I can't say that it was the most anticipated, but when you read the articles about the busloads of people that are traveling down to Florida, to Lakeland, Florida, which is that late 34 was the first year they played in Lakeland, which is their home now. When they have caravans of people, they have people hitchhiking down to Florida. They've got Walter Hagen and Newell Banks, who we're going to find out the world checkers champion is down there playing blindfold checkers with people in the park. This was, at the time, the celebrities of Detroit were all on caravans headed to Lakeland to watch the Tigers. They were so excited about the 1935 season. And so, like I say, the excitement was just palpable. I mean, it was in the air. And then the Lions, of course, they're like going through their own restructuring, and they know they have to try to do something to keep pace with the Tigers. They can't let down on their ability to compete. And so again, this is where we're going to sort of begin today, is this idea that James Norris and Jack Adams, they know that 1935 is going to be a big year. That if they want, this is their chance. They play the hockey followed the other sports. So the Tigers, Lions, and that would be playing, and then the Red Wings season would be kicking off. So they know that, so they're like, when they're playing in 34-35, the primary year, they're sitting there watching all this excitement building for this next season, and they know that they're not part of it. And they want to be a part of it because if they can compete, if they can be part of this renaissance, if they can be mentioned in the same breath as the Tigers, as the Lions, if that puts them, it makes them part of the sporting fabric of the city. And so that was their ultimate objective, was to lay the foundation for hockey in Detroit, to build a franchise and to make it so that it's not just Windsor fans, not just Canadian fans. And that's where they knew that they needed a major revamp. This team, they'd been to the Stanley Cup the prior year, and they knew they had these core players. And just like a refresher, you have Ebby Goodfellow, Herbie Lewis, Larry Ory, Johnny Sorrell, and Doug Young. These 5 guys we talked about in a previous show, we kind of described their sort of playing styles and characteristics. These 5 guys were, Adams knew, they all knew that, they knew that these are their guys. In fact, Ebby Goodfellow was the captain at this moment. And so they knew that they had their sort of anchor players set in place.
So what is it that brings them out of this dip?
That's what we're going to be talking about for the next 2 episodes, because it's a lot to cover.
Yeah.
Because think about it, the rosters at this time were 15. They had 15 guys on a roster. Wow. They played way less games, so that let's not take away from guys nowadays going, they better only play with 15 guys. But they played like half as many games now too. But anyways, but Adams knew he needed a major roster revamp. This one didn't get it done. And so he knew he had his 5 guys. Really, at the time, he thought he had 6. And Cooney Weiland. Cooney Weiland was their lone all-star. He was the only guy that they had. He was like one of, if not the, I haven't written down, one of, if not the best goal scorer of the year that year.
Okay.
I mean, he's an offensive dynamo. This is if anybody that's listening that follows hockey, the way I've seen descriptions of Cooney Weiland, at least in my mind, is like if everybody's ever seen Theo Fleury back in the 80s and 90s. Kind of a smaller guy, but was kind of compact, scrapper type, and would score could score all the time, always a threat. Cooney Weiland was a star.
Okay.
And so that was one of their best players. I mean, he was at that moment, there was really, at the very least, maybe in Adams' mind, 6 guys they had, but other things would transpire that would, reduce it down to 5, as we're about to find out.
So what's the first piece of the puzzle?
So the first piece of the puzzle, that's what we're going to get to. So we're going to take this, like I say, in 2 parts, because today we're going to be talking about the first batch of guys they got to replace it. Okay. So like I said, so the first guy that we're talking about here today.
See, you know what I love about this is Tom, when I met Charles, it's like we were at this art fair, and he's selling his book and stuff, and he's telling me the story, and it's just, he's got about a minute and a half to tell me the story, and it's really the cursory story of the big
it's
three.
A quick summary,
and it's and I love that we get to sit down and we're getting into each one of these individual players that made this tick.
Yeah,
it's vast.
Yeah. And I think there's such important stories for the city and for the sport and for athletics. to share. I love this.
Yeah,
I love this.
I totally
man.
do too.
So who's this cat?
Yeah.
Who's this first cat?
So you got, and so this is like one of the coolest guys. I know I always like, this is my favorite guy ever.
No,
and
they're all great.
Ebby is, like I say, Ebby Goodfellow is my favorite pound for pound Red Wing from this era.
Yeah.
My favorite sort of fan favorite from 35 was Bucko McDonald. But I almost feel bad that I don't list. And this is the guy we're talking about today, Sid Howe, the Ottawa Assassin.
Yeah.
All right, the coolest nickname. We talk a lot about nicknames, but how do you get a better nickname than the Ottawa Assassin? That is pretty awesome.
Right,
that is pretty much the coolest nickname of all time. That's where we're leading them off
There's
today.
a backstory in there somewhere.
Oh, well, that's where we're going to get to on today's episode. Episode number 7. Yes.
Sid Howe, the Ottawa Assassin.
Yes. And we were going to do an entire episode on Sid Howe, but today we're going to do a little bit of a glance over just to show, because the acquisition of him, so there was a major acquisition. So this is the story, okay? So we've already got to the point where we're talking about how in 34 the Red Wings know they're just, they have to do something, right?
Right.
And it's at this moment. So it's February 11th, and there's 14 games left in the season when this announcement comes through that Jack Adams, James Norris and Jack Adams have just acquired 2 players. All right, Sid Howe. Okay. And also Ralph Scotty Bowman. Okay. So but right off the bat, I just want to get right through to anybody that's listening. Okay. And this is kind of Sid Howe is not related to Gordy. Let's just get this off the table.
All right. What about
Sid Howe is not related to Gordy.
Okay.
And then there's a modern day coach, of course. Everybody modern Scotty Bowman for the Red Wings, and this Scotty Bowman is not related to him. Okay. All right. But now
he's got to look though.
Okay, but here's the thing. Now I want to say something that's kind of like a sad situation here.
Yeah.
Which is that the fact that I have to lead off, the fact that I have to every time you mention art shows, when I'm doing this stuff at art shows, when I'm talking to people at art shows and stuff, and I have to, and every time I mention Sid Howe or I mention Scotty Bowman, everybody goes, "Oh, the Scotty Bowman." Or it's like, is it Sid Howe? Is it like
it's the Scotty
is that
Bowman.
like Scotty? Like, is that they don't know, they can't place the year Scotty Bowman was. They think maybe this was like Scotty Bowman was like that. I mean, it's Scotty Bowman.
Yeah.
And then they also Sid Howe. They think they're like, oh my God, that's Gordy. Is that Gordie Howe's relative or whatever?
Yeah.
And the sad thing is that I have to put a disclaimer every single time.
And these guys
that
shouldn't
I
have a
guys.
disclaimer.
They
These gotta
shouldn't
be right.
have a disclaimer.
These guys are
exactly.
Glorious
These guys
in their own right.
These guys should be stars in their own right. These guys should be in the
They should
pantheon.
have a statue.
Yeah, well,
or a banner.
Sid Howe should have a statue. Scotty Bowman, he was a great player too.
Yeah,
Statue worthy, I don't know, but he was really good.
Yeah,
he was really, and that's what I'm saying. But in his name at the very least should be well known.
Yeah,
he was a great player. In Sid Howe, in Sid Howe at the end of his career when he retired from the Red Wings, 11 and a half years after he came to the Red Wings. Sid Howe was the all-time goal scorer in the NHL. And when Gordie Howe comes in, this was what's so ironic, is that here we are in the modern day, and I've got a prerequisite everything with Sid Howe is not related to Gordie. Scotty Bowman is not related to the coach that we all know. But at the time, in 1946, when Gordie Howe came along, right? When he came along, everybody wanted to know if Gordie was related to Sid.
Okay.
It was a complete reversal because Sid Howe was the greatest goal scorer. He was at most goals in NHL history at that point. And they're all like, oh my God, Gordie Howe? Are you related to Sid? You know what I mean? It was reversed because they're like, oh man, if there's another Sid Howe, my God, we might be onto something here. And so now here we are down the road and it's going to be completely reversed. And that's what's so kind of bizarre. Not taking anything from Gordie, of course, but that's what I'm saying. But these players, their names should carry their own weight. It shouldn't have a disclaimer. The modern day Scotty Bowman coach, it should be a coincidence that we also have a legend whose name was Scotty Bowman, and it was a legend before he got there.
I've heard of Sid Howe. Never heard of the other Scotty Bowman.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's for this reason. This is, of many reasons, I guess. But that's another reason why I love doing this show, because now we can talk about these guys and say, here from now on, fellas, from now on, I'm not going to just do this for me. I am not going to say anymore that these guys, that Sid Howe is not related to Gordie.
Tell me about
and
the
I am
assassin.
not going to say anymore that Scotty Bowman is not related to the modern day coach. If you guys want to do it, if you want to tell the viewers at home,
I won't do it.
If you guys want to tell the viewers at home who this is, then go ahead. But from here on out on this show,
nope.
We almost expect you at this point for the viewer at home, right? If we say
educated.
Sid Howe, if we say Scotty Bowman, it's almost to be like a tongue-in-cheek joke. If somebody puts something in the comments going, is that related to Gordy? Guess what? Go back to episode 27 and listen to Charles sit there and go on a rant about why it should not be that way, and listen to all. We'll know that they haven't listened to all the episodes. If they get to the point, they're like, oh, is that related to Gordy? You haven't heard the emphasis that we put on right now with this exclamation mark.
So tell me about the assassin.
All right, so as I've already given away a few points of the story that I had laid out here, all
prim and proper.
Yeah, like the notes are kind of like out of order now.
Yeah.
But you get the general, like, the Ottawa assassin. He's known because he's just like. Do we have the picture up of the screen? Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. So I made this file today because it's cool because you see the color photo of Sid right there.
Yeah.
Sid Howe, I got a ton of pictures of him, and Sid Howe was like the most picturesque hockey player that you could be. Yeah. Perfectly proportioned, great looking guy. And just, you can see, I put that newspaper article then with him skating because you can see him curving around the net. Like he is in full bore, like assassin mode. I mean, he is curling around this net and he looks like he is about to explode at full speed, head up the ice. Everything I've ever seen, like pretty much every picture, when I was looking for a few photos to throw up on the screen, it was hard to choose which picture to bring out because there are so many. Just like every pose of him, like we did the picture with Dutch Clark where it was called the American football player.
Yeah.
And it's like, it was the same with him. Like every picture, he's like this prototypical hockey player. Like he just looks cool. Like he just looks cool in his gear and he's just, that's the American.
Dutch.
That's how, but that's how Sid Howe, like every picture, he's just like, this classic hockey pose. And so anyways, so Sid Howe, he's just, he's this electric goal scorer. But here's the thing. So we're going to sort of start back because it's a really interesting route that Sid Howe came to get to this point where they
from Ottawa.
Sharp guess. I didn't ask the trivia question, but you really nailed that one, Jamie.
The Ottawa assassin.
Yeah,
I'm good like that.
So he comes.
This is my second glass of bourbon too, by the way.
Yeah, that third one you're really going to be answering the questions really well. The third one you're going to be answering the questions like dominoes, man, knocking them down. So, anyways, so he comes out of Ottawa as Jamie. So this guest. And in 1929-30 comes out of Ottawa, and then he goes on. The Ottawa puts him on loan. So this is the thing to understand. Ottawa at this moment in time is really struggling. They're really struggling. They can't afford their players. It's in the depth of the Great Depression. They're this legendary hockey club. They've won Stanley Cups up and down. Adams was part of the Stanley Cup, champion. And so, but Ottawa is having all kinds of problems, and it's these fluctuating problems that are going to lead to some of these players coming to Detroit. So in 1929-30, Sid Howe, this is his rookie year. He plays a little bit with Ottawa. And then after that season, he's put on loan and sent to the Philadelphia Quakers, okay, which is a team that had arisen that we talked about. You just mentioned it earlier on another show that the Pittsburgh Pirates had folded, but they didn't really fold. They actually got relocated. They were down for, I believe, a year. And then the next year they were relocated to the Philadelphia where they became the Quakers and had one of the worst seasons. I think the worst season in NHL history. They only had 4 wins the entire year. Oh. So they were absolutely dreadful. And that was a team that, so Sid Howe was on that team. And so the following year he goes over to the Maple Leafs so he's on loan. So Ottawa suspended operations in 1931-32. They don't play. But at the same time, they didn't fold. They just were like, we just can't afford to really lace up this year. So all of our players we're going to send out on loan, but we're going to retain the rights to the players. So during this brief lull in their operations, Sid Howe was sent to the Maple Leafs. And the Maple Leafs at that point had one of the best teams. And I mean, not one of the best. They won the Stanley Cup that year. So the Maple Leafs were dominant. And the players on the team were just amazing. And so he just wasn't good enough to be on the team. He was still young. He'd just been on a year, just a couple years in hockey. He wasn't good enough at that point. So they sent him down to Syracuse for the minor leagues for the 31-32 season. And then so Ottawa comes back. They resume operations in 1932-33, and he plays the season with Ottawa. And then the following season, Ottawa folds, and their team is relocated. Maybe I just said it wrong. If they didn't fold, they were relocated. Okay. They left Ottawa, and the team moved to St. Louis and became known as the Eagles. All right. And so he plays 2 years with the Eagles, in up into 34-35 when he's acquired by the Red Wings. Now, I know that's a lot I threw at you. I'm not expecting you guys to all remember this,
If
right?
there's a quiz,
I've got to. Yeah, you're in trouble. Yeah, but so in summary, the reason I walked through all these things was because I wanted to get to the summary, which is that Sid Howell plays for 6 teams in his first 6 years.
Wow,
6 teams in 6 years. Okay. Who can ever match? I mean, that's incredible.
But in a good way, he was like, people were like, I want this guy.
Yeah, he was.
Or
a
were
thing.
they?
He was he was a potential rising star,
right?
But it's like, imagine you're a player in your first 6 years. It's every year it's a different team. That kind of, usually a player can, if they're lucky, they can settle into a spot. They kind of know their role. They grow with their line mates. They learn how to play with the other guys on their team, and they develop some kind of chemistry and build a program. Well, in this case, Sid Howell was just bouncing all over the place, looking for, he was like basically, I don't want to say he's a mercenary. He's just kind of moving along with the tide and trying to stay in hockey in whatever team he can play for.
I was almost going to use the word mercenary. Yeah.
Yeah, but a mercenary actually is like, I'm going to play for this guy for money and you can sign me. In this case, he's just kind of like rolling with, really his fortunes are attached to Ottawa.
Okay.
The first they put him on loan, and then then that team that put him on loan that they got for the lease, they sent him to the minors, and then he comes back to Ottawa, who then moves to St. Louis and he rolls with them. You see what I'm saying? He wasn't a mercenary. He was actually cruising along with the fortunes of Ottawa.
Right.
And so it was and at the same, also 1934-35, he is on this St. Louis Eagles team with Ralph Scotty Bowman. And Scotty Bowman, I kind of bring in this guy into the story so I can explain, because once we introduce these two players, there's a sort of a story that ties them together with everything. So Sid Howell's on this St. Louis Eagles team with Scotty Bowman, who himself had played with Ottawa and now is with. He had nowhere near the track record of Sid Howell as far as bouncing so many teams. This is only his second year, and so Scotty Bowman ends up with Sid Howell in with the St. Louis Eagles. Now Scotty Bowman is like, I guess you could say, the style of play he has. He's a defenseman, and Scotty Bowman is like a tough as nails type. Okay. He's a good defenseman, and he's a fighter. He is a scrapper big time. In fact, that's one of the problems that Jack Adams in 35 is going to have to tone him down, because he's taken way too many penalties. That's like one of the things. He just fights everybody. He fights everybody. And so one of the things he's also known for in 35, this was a running joke in 35. I'm not sure how much it applied to every single year of his career, but it kind of gives you an idea of his thing, because like one of the nicknames that they called him in the newspapers was the stitch in time guy.
Oh my God.
The stitch in time guy, because if like hockey players get stitched up whenever they get cut or whatever. In 1935, he's going to go on to have 33 stitches.
Jeez. All right.
33 stitches, like in his face and wherever, like maybe his arm or whatever, but generally speaking, it's in his face, because he's taking pucks. There's one game where they won a game because he took a puck off his face to stop a goal from getting in the goal. They won 1-0. Yeah, Normie Smith, the goalie, got a shutout, and it was the last shot of the game hit him in the face, dude. He was like dove across the ice, took one off the face, and they won. They're like, there's 3 more stitches. That's guy. But this is what's so amazing about the stitch story, okay? Like, okay, great, he had stitches. There's a lot of people get stitches. But no, how many people that get stitches also own a tailor shop in Toronto? So he's a tailor in the off season, and he's getting stitched up all the time. So that's what I mean. Like that's that's what's so cool about him, is like they played off of that job that he has as a tailor to the nines. Like you can see even in his like main photo. That's a little bit tiny to see, but even in the photo we've got up on the screen here, if you could blow it up at all or get a magnifying glass for your screen, he's got a little cut across the bridge of his nose. Okay. Like he's I don't know if it was stitched or not, but you can just see it in the picture if you could look close enough. But so anyway, so he's the stitch in time guy. That's his nickname, by the newspapers and stuff. Yeah. But anyways, he's a rising, talented defenseman. He's a scrapper. He's a tough guy. And I've got some great photos of him. In fact, I've got this one photo where they're posing for a team photo in front of this airplane. Yeah. It was like in the later 30s. It wasn't, this in either of these years, but we'll show it maybe on another episode when we're focusing on him more. But Scotty Bowman is standard. The whole team's lined up for this team photo. And I got this photo I got a lot of the photos from him, including the photo we have on the screen that's a painting where he's in the Eagles jersey, from his son, Gary. I met his son, and he's got the entire treasure trove of stuff. Yeah. And so And so, anyways, the photo I'm talking about in front of this airplane, they're all taking their hats off and waving to the camera, and Scotty Bowman's standing there giving the camera the middle finger.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Team photo in front of the airplane.
Well, you're number one, right?
Yeah,
Nice.
he's giving and he's smiling. He's giving the camera the middle finger. I was
That's
like, that
great.
is so awesome. So if that like gives you a little bit of a clue, kind of like his personality, like a little bit, that's the kind. He was like I say, a tough as nails guy, and so in fact he's so tough that reining him in is going to be one of the obstacles that Jack Adams is going to have to overcome, which we'll get to in another episode.
Is he in the Hall of Fame?
No.
Is Sid? In the
I
Hall
believe
of Fame?
Sid Howe is in the
think
Hall of
he
Fame.
is.
Yes,
Okay.
I believe Sid Howe is in the Hall of Fame.
All right.
Yeah. Anyways, so these are the two guys that the Red. So these two guys. They're both playing great, and Sid Howe's playing especially great for Ottawa because by the end of the year he's going to be the American Division scoring champion with 47 points and 22 goals in I forgot how many games. I don't want to give it mislead, but it's like probably 48 or 49 games. They played around 50 games at that point.
Okay.
So somewhere around there. So anyways, he's got 47 points. Long and short, about a point a game. And and he plays 14 games with the Red Wings and is going to have 20 points for the Red Wings in that season, including 8 goals in 14 games. So that's a great numbers. But here's the thing. So this is like this is why I want to kind of package them together to talk about it because they came as a package.
Okay.
All right. On February 11th, 1935, just about the time that the Tigers are maybe a month away from going to spring training. Yeah. That's right about the time that they're the hype for the Tigers is starting to pick up. And at this moment, like I say, there's about 14 games left in the season of the 34-35 Red Wings season, and they spend $50,000. $50,000 to acquire these two guys
In 1934.
Yes,
35.
on November November or February 11th, 1935. $50,000 to get these two guys.
And that's what they spent on Cochran, right?
Well, that's where I was going to go next with this. So the Tigers, think about this. So the Tigers were on like their last gasp
right
at the end of 1933. And so Frank Navin, the owner, goes out and rolls out that big old eye-popping 10000, right? $100,000.
Yeah.
Easy to print. Looks $100,000 for Mickey Cochran, right?
Yeah.
Looks huge in the press. The Tigers are going places. And I believe that it was a similar effect of these two players getting added to the Red Wings just as an eye-popping, guess what? We know our season was not good, but we just spent $50,000 on these two guys, right? And that's what I mean. Like they might not have gotten too many headlines, but that's a decent headline. That's to start letting anybody that is following Detroit hockey know that they're about to take this next season real serious. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I'm saying. It was a flashy free agent sign, and I like to think of just a totally random. It's a fictionalized scenario, but I like to think that this is how that trade went down. That the coach of the coach of Ottawa who made this deal, he's like, yeah, I'll do 47,000 or 45,000 for the pair. And Jack Adams goes, I'm not going to pay a penny less than 50,000. Like he bids it up because they want that round number. You know what I mean? If it's 45,000, that's a lot, but it's not 50.
Yeah.
50,000. You know what I mean? Like that's just got a ring to it. It's almost as much of a marketing thing as anything. So it's a splash. There's no doubt about that. And so anyways, the next component of this story is to understand is the coach that they got this deal from, because this deal is actually going to cause a ripple through the NHL. Like, towards the end of their careers, James Norris and Jack Adams, the rest of the league like hated these guys. They did not like them. They were not popular around the league. And so here's the thing. I'm about to read, like, I think this is one of these first examples of how their reputation around the league started to grow in sort of a negative, right? Like they didn't like detest them, but they just were like, they were kind of known for like, there's, they were just people like, they weren't like part of the inner circle, like best buddy club type of thing. There were main people in it, of course, but they were like, yeah, we're not gonna, hang out every day type of situation. Anyway, so what happened is that the coach of the St. Louis Eagles is a guy named George Boucher. Okay. Yeah. And George Boucher was also the captain of the 1926-27 Ottawa Stanley Cup champions, which is, I remember that team photo we talked about. That team photo is going to come into play in so many different ways. Right? And so that we showed it a few episodes ago, but it was the team photo of the 1926-27 Ottawa Stanley Cup champions, in which Jack Adams was a part of it. So George Boucher was the coach of that team, and he's the one that made this deal to sell these two players to Jack Adams and James Norris. So why that's important is because excuse me, following the season, at the winter meetings for the NHL, which began in October 15th, 1935. So following the season, the Eagles are going to vanish. Okay, the Eagles are going to this is the final death knell of the Ottawa franchise.
Right.
Okay, we've talked about how they've moved around and stuff like this, but the Eagles are the final incarnation of the Ottawa franchise, and after 34-35, they're going to be completely done. They're folding. Okay, so what happens is when a team folds, what ends up happening is that all of their players get cast into a fishbowl. Right. And then the coach from each team draws the players out, and then that's the player that they get. They get them for free. So they all put their names in a hat and they draw the players for free. Right.
Oh, okay.
So,
that's a heck of a draft.
Yeah. It's called a dispersal draft.
Right.
Sometimes there's an expansion draft when they're about to add a team and they get to take a player from each of the teams. But in this case, it's a dispersal draft in which now each team is getting all
players
the players from the thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. But the idea just think about this though, the idea that the Eagles had sold these two guys prior to the dispersal draft, and George Boucher, the coach of the team, was also the captain of the Ottawa team and is obviously buddy with Jack Adams. Basically, like, these guys are, these other teams are like, they should have been part of the dispersal draft. You know what I mean? So maybe there's like some, it's almost like it's almost like, because they sold it like before this happened. So shenanigan type things. Yeah. And from what I've seen, there was a little bit of an issue from Frederick McLaughlin, from the meeting. And in fact, I wrote about it in the movie to show, that was one of the scenes I have in the movie is McLaughlin going, this is ridiculous. They just took our, those two guys they signed should have been part of this. So anyways, I can see that there'd be, potentially animosity that comes out of this because they're like, they should have been in the punch bowl. They shouldn't have been sold off to Adams. Now they got these two stars that come over there. And who's to say they weren't worth more than $50,000 and Adams got a deal, So, especially the way Sid Howe's career ended up playing out, which he's turned out to be a Hall of Famer, superstar and all this. So anyways, and right around the same time, it brings up the next player that the Red Wings acquire. Mm-hmm. His name is Marty Berry. And so anybody that has ever looked at any Detroit Red Wings history books, the three biggest names, whenever they talk about the 1930s, the three biggest names they always talk about is Marty Berry, Larry Ory, and Herbie Lewis. And it's clockwork, man. It is absolute clockwork. You ever look in a book that has the 1930s Detroit sports in it, whether it's a book that's focused on the Red Wings, whether it's a general history of the Red Wings history, it never fails. It's always a picture of Marty Berry in the center, Larry Ory to the right, and Herbie Lewis to the left. This line of these three guys, and with good reason. I mean, Marty Berry. They're gonna the addition of Marty Berry is gonna they're gonna be the top line in hockey that year. But nobody ever really goes into Marty Berry, and he is a Hall of Famer. Marty Berry is an absolute stud, and so nobody ever talks about like who he was or why he was on. He's in every single history book and exactly what he does, and so Marty Berry. So in the story of how his acquisition is actually it is actually in a lot of in books. And a lot of people will actually give this credit as they usually glance over the preseason of this, and the main thing they do focus on is the acquisition of Marty Berry in exchange for Cooney Weiland.
Okay,
all right. So we already mentioned Cooney Weiland as their lone all-star. He's like the guy that's they're probably their best scorer on their team at that point as far as volume scorer, and Cooney Weiland is traded for Marty Berry. And Marty Berry is in his own right. They're both centers. That's what's so interesting about this trade is that both Marty Berry and Cooney Weiland are both centers for their respective clubs, and they're both amongst the top three best players on their teams. So this is a straight swap for centers of superstar centers from two different teams, right? That's what's so interesting about this trade. Usually, I'm going to trade a defenseman because I need to shore up my forward line or something. There's always a little bit of difference. It's rare that you ever trade two guys that are straight up. I mean, like we saw it this weekend with Matt Stafford getting traded, quarterback for quarterback. Of course, there was other draft picks at him, but it's kind of like that. It's like, why would you trade Cooney Weiland? He's an all-star center for another center, for another different guy who's also good. Like, people are always wondering about this concept. And to answer that question, I'm actually going to bring in Jack Adams to answer this question. I got a quote right here.
All right.
Because that's when people were just going, why is that? Like, so anyway, so here is that page. This is one. Where is that here? Where is it at?
Where's my sticky notes when I need them?
I had it there. Okay, so here it is right here. Okay, well, so anyways, so this is the quote right here. So it's an article. So this article. I didn't have a date to this, but it was a newspaper article, and it came from the scrapbooks from Norma Smith, who was the daughter of Normie Smith, who was the goalie of the Red Wings. So,
God, you've met so many cool people.
Yeah,
in
it
your
was
travels.
cool. Absolutely. Yeah, Norma Smith was fantastic. I got more photos and stuff from her than probably anybody else. Sure, she had her father had collected every single article from the Red Wings for like a 3 or 4 year bracket.
Wow.
Every article. She had it was like an encyclopedia of Red Wings newspaper photos and stuff, and newspaper articles. It was amazing. So anyway, this was an article that came out of there, but there was no date on it.
Okay.
That's why I say it's an undated, unidentified. I didn't even know what newspaper it was, and I didn't know what date it was. But this story comes out of that. Okay. Mm-hmm. And like I say, the goal is to answer the question about why Jack Adams would trade these two centers, center for center.
Sure.
So at the time the deal was made, followers of the Red Wings couldn't understand what manager Jack Adams meant by allowing his first-string center, Iceman, to get away. They shrugged their shoulders and whispered all kinds of things. Cooney had been one of the favorites with Red Wings customers. He had been the main cog in the Wings' front line, working between Larry Orey and Herbie Lewis. And it was looked upon as a fatal move to the Wings' chances of landing in the playoffs when Weiland was sent away, even for Barry. We got around to talking about the trade another night in the dressing rooms while the Wings and Bruins were preparing for their battle. I'd say it was a perfect trade, Manager Adams remarked. I understand I have nothing against Weiland. I think he is a great player, yes, a great one, but I am perfectly satisfied with the work of Barry for us, and I know the Bruins are satisfied with the results too. So I'd say it was a perfect trade. What caused you to break up your first-string line and make the deal in the first place? Adams was asked. That's easy to answer, the smiling pilot of the Wings came back. There is no denying that Weiland is a great player, but what we needed more than anything else was beef combined with speed. We had to have players who could stand up under the strain of a hard campaign. And what did we have? We had Long John Sorrell and Gordon Pettinger, two slim fellows. We had Larry Orey, another little fellow, and we had Weiland, the long grind was too much of a strain on them. We needed someone with beef who still combined the virtues of all the others. So yeah,
he needed an Iron Man.
So he needed a little bit more of a bruiser.
Yeah,
right? He needed a little bit more of a bruiser, and Weiland was more of this the smaller goal scoring types that he had plenty of.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the answer to that question, and that's a question that's one of the biggest questions throughout the entire year. That newspaper articles are having fodder with, saying who got the better of the Cooney Weiland Marty Barry trade. That was like one of the main. They were always revisiting that subject. In fact, there was that one, like they were keeping track of how many goals each had scored to compare it with each other to say, to try to see, who would win out on this trade. It was an ongoing story throughout the entire year.
Okay.
And so, anyways, we already got an indication from Adams that Marty Barry was, they needed more beef, a bigger guy, more rugged guy. And I've got this great quote here that this is the only other quote I really want to read today, but I think it's a good one. And it's a little description about what kind of player Marty Barry was. Okay. So this article, this actually comes once again from Phil Arranger, If They Played Hockey in Heaven, which is the Jack Adams story. So this talks about Marty Barry, and there's that rugged component that Adams was looking for in that player. So seldom one to get a penalty and never one to commit a deliberate foul, Barry paradoxically was the league's most feared man on the ice. Nobody monkeyed around with the Montreal Irishman. They were afraid of the wicked power he had in each of his massive fists and learned early in his career to respect the Detroit Star. In his early days in the league, before everybody became aware that he was such a gentleman, Lionel Conacher made the mistake of smashing Barry into the boards and then slash him with his stick. Lionel, if you do that again, I'll cut your head off with my fingernails and toss it in the net, Barry said, holding the stunned Conacher a foot off the ice with one of his strong arms. Rival players heard about the warning, but they were apparently skeptics or playing deaf. Marty soon cured them and made believers of all of them with his hammering hands.
Nice.
So once again, Lionel Conacher makes an appearance. We talked about him briefly last episode. Lionel Conacher was voted the best Canadian athlete of the first half of the 20th century.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy played every sport. He was a monster. He was Lionel Conacher was one of the most feared men in hockey too. Like he's saying he held him up with one hand. Like I might have to dispute that a little bit because Lionel Conacher was tough. Man.
Yeah.
I don't think he's picking him up with one hand. Like like going, don't you ever say that to me again. Like he's like Arnold, going, don't you ever mess with me again like that, Lionel. Like he's not. I don't think he's that awesome. You know what I mean? Like I have no doubt that he was tough because that comes out all the time. And I have no doubt that people didn't really want to mess with Barry. Yeah. Like he wasn't like Ebby Goodfellow. Ebby Goodfellow was the type of player that like Ebby would scrap. Like he was almost like I don't want to say he was an enforcer like a Bob Probert, but he was more of the type of guy that like he looked out for his teammates, he looked out for himself. He had no problem with jumping into a fight. He was a little bit more of the fight starter, whereas Marty Barry was more of like the type that like just let me do my thing and you're not gonna get hurt. Like just don't mess with me though. If you mess with me, it's over. You know what I mean? Like he was that kind of guy. Like he didn't like really seek the fights out, but if you got tangled up with him, you're probably in trouble. So it was just wise to just play hockey with him, not try to body him too much and get him upset with you. So anyways, that was the type of player that we're dealing with here. In the skill set that he had was, besides just being like a goal scorer, Marty Barry was one of, if not the best passer in the entire league. He was an outstanding passer.
That's huge, man.
Yeah,
that's it's get it onto the other person's stick. I mean, that's
the key.
Yeah. So anyways, Marty Barry that's how Marty Barry is acquired. And so he's like an anchor of this top line with Larry Ory and Marty Barry.
Did he call in the article there? Did they call him the Montreal Irishman?
Yeah, he said nobody monkeyed around with the Montreal Irishman.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So I love all these little nicknames, right? The Ottawa Assassin, the Montreal Irishman.
Yeah, and you almost get a picture of the type of guy that
all these
the Montreal Irishman, like just like this rugged tough guy, like thing, like you almost like it just paints a picture just with those nicknames.
Love all the little nicknames.
Yeah.
Man.
So anyway, that's how they get Marty Barry, who's going to be like, he's going to have this, and he's just going to have an incredible year by the end of the year, and he's going to be the guy that everybody sees in the Detroit history books. Whenever you see, which is very rare, whenever you see, they got to mention something about the 30s Red Wings,
Yeah.
They got to have at least one picture.
Yeah.
And whenever they do, it's always that. It's rare that the only other, maybe the second most ever seen player is maybe Normie Smith, the goalie, or Ebby. It's even rare to see Ebby Goodfellow. It's like, it's always the line with Barry, Ory, and Lewis. And then it's rarely anything else. You don't see anything else.
Right.
And then, like I say, if you do see something else, rarely it'll be Ebby Goodfellow or Normie Smith. Otherwise, there's nothing. You don't see anybody else. All right. And it's like, and so that's what I'm saying. Like that. So this is the guy that's in that picture. That if you're listening right now and you got a Detroit history book, go open it up and see what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You're gonna flip to the hockey section, and there's gonna be one picture there, and it's gonna be Barry, Ory, and Lewis. And so this is the guy that centers that line in 34, 30, or in 35, 36, and for the next 3 years after that.
Do we get to the Hurricane talking about nicknames?
That's our next man.
Is that the Hurricane?
That's the next man. Yeah, you got the picture ready to go.
I got a picture of the Hurricane.
So this is here we go. So the next guy on our list. So now we've got we talked about the first three guys that are key to understand. The next guy to bring up is Hurricane Heck Kilrea. Yeah. So the photo I got up on the screen here. We have a picture of Heck. It's isolated from that same 1926-27 Ottawa team photo.
Okay.
All right. This is another guy, another connection to that team, and so he was actually a line mate with Jack Adams on that team. And so Jack knows him incredibly well. In fact, he had played with Ottawa, and then from 1925 to 1931, and then when Ottawa again was having trouble, when they were having difficulties, the Ottawa sent him on loan to the Falcons. So he'd already played for Detroit in 1931-32 as a Detroit Falcon. And so after that 1931-32 season, I think he was a little bit of a mercenary at that point. He was allowed to kind of pick what team he wanted to go to because the team he went to, because he jumped after that 31-32 season when he was on loan, he went over to Toronto for the 1933-34 season. And then in 19 after 30 after that he ends up signing up with the Red Wings 1935 before the 1935 season, and he's acquired for $7,500. And so $7,500 is what the Red Wings pay for him. So they buy him too. And so again, $7,500. And so Hekil Ria is known as one of the fastest men in the NHL. Okay, he is speed and he is scoring. He doesn't put up massive numbers. He's more of kind of like a second or third line like winger. And he's going to chip in goals pretty regularly. And so he was called by Tommy Gorman, who was a just legendary coach at the time, Montreal Maroons coach in this year. And he was called by Tommy Gorman the most dangerous man on the Detroit club. So he's one of these guys that he's not like the number one guy by any means, but he's the guy that if you don't have somebody on him at pretty much all times, you can't just put some raw bone rookie on him. He's gonna, he'll abuse you all game. So you have to account for him in some capacity. He was a dangerous player. He was he was a consistent goal scorer. Chipped in with goals kind of when it counted. And actually in 1928, there was actually a fastest man in the NHL contest, and he won that. And what you had to do was you had to skate around the rink with a puck. And they would time you to see how fast you could skate around the ice. And there's an article that talks about in the book I have it. It show it when he raced in 28. He has a list of all the different times for all the different players that he raced against. And he had the top one. It was 16.25 seconds, a lap around the ice in 16 seconds with a puck, skating with it.
Wow!
This guy is just a burner. I don't know. To compare how I don't really have anything to compare it to, but I know I can't do it. 16 seconds. 16 seconds. It would take me probably that long just to get halfway down the
in an Uber,
maybe.
But
yes, that's just he was super fast. And like I say, he's going to be a big time contributor to this Red Wings team, and it kind of gives Jack Adams depth. He doesn't have he's not on this top line, but he knows that whatever line he puts Heck on is going to be an offensive threat whenever he's on the ice. So that's what he brings to the team in this with his acquisition.
So and again back to that 27.
That team
group, amazing. Just so many things coming out of there.
We haven't even got to all of them yet. So anyways, that's what I mean. That what I said at the beginning, I was like, this team is so important because it's because Adams, and it wasn't a coincidence. That's where Jack Adams played. He was there. Yeah. He met all these guys. That's where he came directly to the Red Wings, and that was his pipeline, to other, to the other teams and stuff, to other people.
I love how this is unfolding with this team.
That's what I'm saying. The connections are there. So that's what we want to talk. These are all the people I want to talk to about in this episode, because the next episode, it's a whole nother batch of players, and they're going to be coming from a whole different angle. So that's why I was happy to kind of encapsulate these guys in this. These are some big time guys that are going to factor in. So long and short of it, now we lost Cooney Weiland in the trade for Marty Berry. So now we've found 9. That's count your numbers. We got 4 guys plus the 5 anchor guys that we already talked about. So that's 9 guys that we've identified that are going to be guys that are part of this 1935 season, core guys. So we got about 6 to go. But next week we're going to be talking. There's a couple, 2 or 3 guys that are that are just going to rotate throughout the season. So next week we're going to be talking about I don't know the exact number, but I think 3 guys next week that are going to form the 3 more. So they have 12 of the guys, and then there's probably 3 guys for the rest of the year that are just kind of rotators. But I'm saying so next week there's a great story to come up with next week, and so that's why we got through what I wanted to get through today.
Matt and I have a small Hall of Fame hockey brag.
We kind of do.
Really?
Yeah.
What is it?
What do we got coming up there, Matt Fox?
Man Cave Happy Hour, the little podcast that Jamie and I do.
Yeah.
We have a Chicago Blackhawk goalie.
Hall of Fame, baby.
Hall of Fame goalie. He's going to be joining the Man Cave because he started his own bourbon company.
Really? Eddie Belfour.
Eddie Belfour.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So we're going to have Eddie.
I think the Eagle, I think they call him.
Yep.
Yeah,
Eddie the Eagle. So we're going to have Eddie. Eddie's going to be with us on the Man Cave Happy Hour
cool.
coming up on February 23rd.
Yes.
A Tuesday, 7
Is that what his
p.m.
nickname was? Did I get it? Oh, I thought you were saying yes because you looked it up.
And,
No.
Okay.
You're good.
Yeah, February
That's
23rd.
cool, though. What is he, Detroit? Is he Detroit? Oh, he's going to be on the
He's going to be on
Zoom?
there. He's going to
cool.
zoom. He's going to zoom on
That's
in.
cool,
so,
man, yeah.
if anybody's a hockey Eddie Fan,
that'd be
Blackhawk.
cool. You guys have
I think he
fun,
played
yeah.
for the Leafs and Dallas, and there were like 3 teams he played. Like
He played
did
for the
like
Blackhawks. He was tough for them. That's
19
for
years.
sure.
Yeah, 19 years. A lot of them with the Blackhawks. The other major teams escaping me, and I know Dallas.
He
moved around a little bit.
Yeah,
but,
he was great. He was a great goalie. Absolutely.
And so we're gonna have Eddie on. Really excited about it.
That is cool.
And they're supposedly sending us some of his bourbon too, which makes me pretty damn
That's
happy.
cool.
So,
That's cool.
keep
Except,
checking my mailbox. I'm like, honey, the mail come in? The mail come in?
Damn.
Little brag for
Called
the man.
Belfour
Little
Spirits.
plug. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, Belfour. Yeah, so he's got a rye, he's got a whiskey, he's got a bourbon, and I think he's got one other, like either a gin or a vodka.
Yeah, we're gonna dig into it.
So so he's got
a lot of toast.
yeah.
Oh yeah, it's always a fun show to do.
yeah.
You talk about
Clink.
try
Clink.
some new bourbons out. That's a great show.
So Tom, you had something over there. You told me you want to tell me about.
Well,
Is that something
here's
for
the
here?
we're trying to close up these shows with a little "Did you know" from Tom, little segment here.
Yeah.
So, do we have Matt? Do you have the little sound bite thing that beeps in?
I believe Jamie's got it right there.
Do you have the little button that you push to say it's like a little song goes?
Oh.
Did you know with Tom? Like some kind of like a little jingle like.
Well, now
did
we
you
do.
know
No,
with
but
Tom?
next-
He is here.
but-
like some kind of song that plays with it. Like
Next week.
oh, okay, we didn't have that. All right, I thought we had that ready to go. Oh, that's right, we didn't talk about it. I'm just
No,
made it up right here
you
and
did.
try to put you on the spot.
You
Okay,
did.
I forgot. All right.
All right, hold on. We got okay. Did you know with Tom?
That's not bad. You pitched
There you go.
it, chipped
Matt's
you came
kicking
in
it.
with a pinch.
Matt's freestyling over there.
Yeah.
Well, I guess did you know that the Los Angeles Lakers were once the Detroit Gems?
Get out.
In 1946, the Gems were formed in Dearborn, Michigan, and they only lost 4 games, or they won 4 and lost 46. And a man came from Minneapolis and bought them and renamed them the Lakers, and now they're in Los Angeles, and they were the Detroit Gems.
Well,
so if
Did he
you
take
look-
him to Minneapolis
Yeah,
first? Because that's
well,
the
they-
land of 1,000 lakes too.
Well, what they did is they were the Gems, and then they bought the franchise, moved them to Minneapolis, renamed the team the Lakers, and then they went to Los Angeles. So if you root for the Los Angeles Lakers, you're rooting for the Detroit Gems.
Yeah,
Did you
that's
know
where they
that?
started. Yeah. Well, here's the thing, Tom. I did know that, and I want to add one little thing to that
Yeah.
story because I only knew that because you told me. I mean,
Right.
but it was years ago, and I actually looked into it a little bit on my own spare time, and I found something else that's kind of cool to add on to your did you know story.
I did
Because you haven't been talking enough. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jamie. I'll turn it over to you, buddy.
I got nothing. That's all. Snarky.
I'll put you on the spot. Let's
snarky-
just take a nice little silent pause.
snarky comments is all I
let's let
got.
Jamie just have the spotlight. for a second.
Snarky comments are all I have. That was
So,
it.
anyways, what you mentioned there was the record of the Detroit Gems. Well, I'll just take it right on in. I'll take it right on in.
So the record, but what?
They won.
So you mentioned the record. Mention the record again of the Detroit Gems.
They won 4 and lost 46.
That's awful, right? You
Oh.
lose 46 games out of 50.
Right.
That's hideous.
That's kind of like Detroit sports today.
It's like, well, it's not that bad, but it's like the Philadelphia Quakers, which is the worst record. I mean, that's one of the worst records ever, right? But this is like a did you know I want to add on to.
Yeah.
Okay, whenever a team, they had the NBA draft back then. Okay, they had the NBA draft back then.
Yeah.
And so just like today, the worst team gets the top overall pick.
Sure.
Okay, and because of the Detroit Gems' awful season, when they moved to Minneapolis, they moved with the number 1 overall pick. So when they landed in Minneapolis to start this thing, they got the number 1 overall pick in the draft. You know who they acquired?
I bet you I do.
I don't.
George Mikan.
Got it. Tom get it. So I did my did you know to Tom?
watched-
Who is it?
George Mikan was like the first superstar in the NBA.
Oh, okay.
Like,
I
he
watched
was a
him-
dominant
How long
center.
were
He was a
they in,
center. He was
Minneapolis?
Dominant.
How long were they in
Just
Minneapolis?
a couple years, I think.
3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
at
it
the-
wasn't
at the
long.
match,
Was
but-
Mikan with them when they moved
because
to
when
LA?
Mikan went out to LA, he was like the first great LA
Okay.
Lakers center,
Right.
and he was like a star. I mean, he was like
Yeah.
a superstar, and like he was like the first like superstar of the NBA.
Okay.
And they're like, "How did we get this guy?" They're like, nobody knows, but he's just here. He's amazing.
You blew chunks a
Yeah,
few
they're
years
like-
ago. That's
it's
why.
kind of like that's how the Lakers always are. You look at them, they're like, hold on a second, they got Shaquille O'Neal. How'd they get him? like you know what I mean? Like I know how they got him, but I'm saying like you're like, oh, that's all right. Yeah, they got Kobe, they got Shaquille, they got LeBron James. How'd they get him again? Like, it's just crazy. Like, it goes all the way back. I mean, they go Wilt Chamberlain. All they got, Wilt Chamberlain. How'd they get him? Like, didn't he play with the Bucks or whatever? They got Magic Johnson. How did they get? That's what I'm saying. Like, they just always are like, oh yeah, we got George Mikan. They're like, where did he come from?
He really helped build the NBA. Mikan did.
That's what I'm saying. He was that star. Yeah. Like, if you look up George Mikan,
so many things lead back to Detroit.
Yeah, but if you look up anybody that's listening to this, if you have a chance to look up George Mikan, whenever you start, even Wikipedia, I'm sure has a pretty good write up on him because he was that big of a guy, big of a name or whatever, and you'll see how big of an impact he was on the NBA. George Mikan was like sort of like the guy that the entire NBA kind of coalesced around. He was like this big dominant center, and then the LA Lakers started adding more pieces. They started being championship teams and stuff. And so, he was a big guy. And so but they got him because the Gems were so bad.
There you go.
Yeah.
They were bad.
Yeah.
All right. So, Tom, you always say this about this hour.
Where does it go?
Yeah. It's just, and there it is. It's another hour gone. Detroit City of Champions, DetroitCityOfChampions.com. On the socials, find us, YouTube and Facebook. Thank you. If you've listened, thanks for sharing these stories, listening in and tuning in for these stories. We appreciate it. Any comments are greatly appreciated and most very welcome. Subscribe if you haven't. And Matt, thanks for all you're doing over there.
Just pushing your buttons.
You do a great job, buddy.
That is it. Tom, I appreciate you coming in.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. And
trudging in, and I just enjoy. I thank you, Charles, for letting me listen to the stories and say rude things.
I thank you guys for doing this whole thing, for the interest and for the studio you guys have here. It's a beautiful studio. I always brag about how great it is in here. And
thank you.
You guys are always very welcoming. And me and Tom after the show usually just like hang out. You guys are like walking out the door. Me and Tom will be sitting here talking about stuff for like a half hour. So I appreciate all the you guys are always really cool, and I always appreciate all the work you guys do.
Well, and everybody that's joining us on this adventure, Ming Chen gave us a thumbs up. The comic book men. He's from New Jersey. He was on with the comic men
with Kevin Smith.
Yeah, he's Kevin Smith and
excellent.
Thank you. He's a big New Jersey podcast guy.
All right, cool. Thank you. Thanks for
lots of love between Detroit and New Jersey on the podcast sides.
Oh, yeah.
Sports, not so much. Podcast, lots of love back and forth between Detroit and New Jersey. So, all right,
appreciate that.
We'll do it again, and everybody else who Erica chimed in, and a couple other people as well. So, thank you.
I think Erica was laughing at you and your intro because first time I heard your intro, I did not know that was you.
Oh yeah, he's got his own little. He's got his 1930s voice.
I love that's so much fun.
Oh,
and,
Catherine, totally.
Catherine said hi as
My
well.
sister, yep.
So thanks everybody who checks
Tell
in
her
with
I
us.
said hi.
And hi back, Catherine. We'll see you guys next time. It's Detroit City of Champions.